My name is Nataliya Gumenyuk. I'm a Ukrainian journalist. I'm working in Ukrainian media for almost like more than 15 years. I used to run a large TV station, I've been the foreign correspondent for biggest media. For the last 2 years, I run the organization called Public Interest Journalism Lab, which combined documentary production, media research, and working on the research on how we better report on the complex and sensitive issues. And currently we go on as a team, but in addition to that, I do write the articles to The Guardian, to Washington Post, and to the Rolling Stones, and kind of provide quite a lot of like just free comments to the major media outlets from CNN to, like MSNBC and the others. I was at home. The invasion started like something 4:30. Somehow we knew at that night that something might happen. So we cut, but it was the situation was quite volatile. There were a lot of warnings earlier, but there was not so many kind of signs really from Russia at that moment that would be that day. Also, we never knew that it would be like the bombs on Kiev, but that was discussed. But somehow there was, at that moment, there was not just the Western intelligence which was writing without any clarification, but a notion that the Ukrainian government is also more than prepared exactly at that night. It could be not, it could be, like another night, but exactly because that, and there was this time of 4 a.m., we didn't really went to bed or like try to stay as long as possible awake. But like already while going to the bed was quite clear that better to get the news. And before falling asleep, we kind of saw the Putin's address, which was very grim, and it was published kind of at night, and then after it was published, it was possible to hear in Kiev, not really possible to hear where I am, the explosion just somewhere distant, so it was not really sure what would happen. But then on Facebook and elsewhere, it was quite clear that people saying like, I heard the explosions, and friends in Kharkiv said we hear the explosion. It was quite clear that it has started.
Okay.
So you need to kind of change and switch to a different mode. My focus is the conflict reporter. If there are a few reporters in the country who has experience, who teach conflict reporting, and who's been covering the conflict for the last 8 years, so I'm kind of one of them. So that's the point. A closest friend of mine is running the news at the public broadcasting, and that's there is no question for us. Like that's what we do, and we are the core people who report that. And it's like as if you're asking the general why he doesn't leave the country at the moment of when the war starts. I didn't do that much groundwork within the last years because there was no so intense events. It's like that. You see something, you go somewhere, you write about it. I've been able to travel for the last months, for the last weeks. Go to Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, some other areas around the country and write about that. But in between, we have the curfew, so you really need to drive before the night. There are some complications. The hotels don't really work, so you stay with the friends or elsewhere. The movement around the country, it's more complicated. So it's just 24/7 work, to be honest. Beyond the difference is that beyond a lot of people, asking for some help, support, anything, so you need to deal with that as well. A lot of people just asking you, how are you? And you feel you need to be polite to answer them, to be honest, like it's no time for that, but you feel like you need, people are expressing a lot of support, so a lot of your energy going to answer them and calm them down, to be honest. A lot of people outside of Ukraine. I mean, we do receive a lot of requests from foreign reporters, foreign media. Sometimes they're really, I'm grateful for them asking. So we're happy to share. Sometimes people just asking all kind of the things, like calling you at night from unknown numbers, writing you, demanding something from you, what you should do for the network A and B. So it's just constant communication. And I do appreciate, like last days, I finally came home after traveling. I wasn't staying at home for the first days of the war because it was not very clear, what would happen to the area where I am. And I, in fact, this is the first day I appreciate I can be like in front of the laptop and the write in a normal situation than, writing from somewhere in between of like traveling early in the morning and talking to the people. For instance, like I was explaining, what the happening to the Kiev, how there were first attack on the Kiev, how the first buildings had been destroyed, what are the first people have been attacked. For one of the biggest story, the first like larger dispatch I've been embedded with the city patrol police for the first nights when they were under the constant threat that the city could be overtaken. In Odessa, I done the story how the city is preparing from, like from the logistical point of view, to the, talking to the local government, to the activists, to actually the feeling of the mood in the city. My focus was on telling the story on this multi-ethnic city where there are Greeks, Jews, Ukrainians, Russians, but all together, people of all political spectrums, transgender community, how they are all there together in this fight, and how unacceptable for them is the Russian invasion. In Mykolaiv, I did the story, this is a city in the front line, how this city is kind of defending Odessa. So I talked to the, being to the areas which has been shelled, talked to the local mayor, governor, whom I knew earlier, and how they kind of switched to this military mode. In Kharkiv, I've done the story on how the residents of the most heated area in Kharkiv, how the people are staying there, how the people find asylum on the subway station, the hospital, and like in another town in Ochtyrka, we were with my colleague, one of the first, if not the first journalist been there. The bombardment are disproportional to that, if you really speak about the tiny provincial town. So like telling these kind of the stories. So I do actually telling what's happening on the ground. I do write op-eds, but they, in my case, they're still very much based on what on what I've seen with my eyes. The practical problem is the scale of what is going on and the distance. Ukraine is the largest country in Europe. It takes hours and hours to get from the place to place. And if within the last years we had developed like high-speed railway, so you would take 5-6 hours to get from one regional capital to another one, really in kilometers it would be 600 kilometers, 800 kilometers to get from one place to another. So you definitely need to have a car. You definitely need to have a driver capable to drive in these circumstances, able to drive in these circumstances. You need to have funds to do that. You need to ensure that maybe your car should be a better equipped car, so these are and when you reach the place, then you have a place to stay, and this place to stay is safe, and you should always know that you should have everything you need, because in case there won't be electricity or there won't be connection, that you need to carry everything on the like that. I used to work in the way I work. I like to work alone. I like to spend time with the people. I do not work with kind of the pool of journalists. I think it's very like the focused work when you really spend time with people, when you devote all your time not to chatting with the colleagues, but spending time with people. But because the public transportation isn't really existing. You need like to carry loads of things with you. You come from one place to another with all your belongings because you don't know whether you would be able to go there. What if the city would be shut down? What if you are not really on the time under the curfew? So this is something in the consideration. That's one point. Another one, which is not which there is no way to sort it now. The most, let's say, of course, you need to have the bulletproof vest. There is a shelling, and it's random. The problem is they're shelling on the civilian areas and elsewhere, and we understand you cannot count on that. The shelling, it's not even the street fight, it's a heavy artillery. And if something happened, like things can be extremely dangerous if you really go closer to the place. But the worst thing is, of course, that we cannot work in the towns occupied by Russians. They just shot journalists on the spot. Like international journalists, Ukrainian reporters, they don't need them. The journalists who died in Ukraine, international reporters, they exactly were trying to reach to the places where are under Russian control, and they don't care. This as the journalists. It's quite, I think we know that we just do not go there. There is a limit. There is no way to get there. There is no physical way because the road would be closed, and you know that you can't even approach the Russian checkpoint, the Russian controlled checkpoint. So it doesn't really make sense for you to do this job for, it's military conflict. So it's not really, you can get into this area somewhere through some forest, it's not really like that. These are the towns, they are the military objects. So in this regard, we still manage to keep the communication with some people. The problem that exactly in those towns which are under the Russian occupation, they usually shut down the mobile connection somehow. So the occupied towns are shut down from us. But the biggest challenge is really the scale. You need to consider where will you go. And like, if you go, it's always expedition for a couple of days. My husband is Russian journalist. He has to leave the country because despite he has a credential for a Russian male, it's quite difficult to work here. He's not really specialized and focused on the foreign news. He's a TV reporter. He's not like the writer. Therefore, like if you're just a writer and you walk calmly from somewhere, maybe it would be still the way. But if you're a TV person and you need to film and you need to be on the spot, that's quite impossible. Apart from the media he used to work, actually they are shut down in Russia. They don't exist at the moment. So the risk to take, it's quite, how to say it, it's even useless, because of course you can do it for somebody, but most of these independent outlets he used to work, they are not really reporting, because some of them are shut down, like the major TV Rain. So this did affect the life. Of course, we would prefer we don't work together, but like that would be the different opportunity for us to stay together, what we can't. So that's the one point. The second, of course, I needed to move away the family. It happened that I have more friends outside of Ukraine, and because I have more friends outside of Ukraine than relatives inside, I thought that the resources in Ukraine to say are kind of exhausted. There could be other people who cannot go abroad. They better stay at the relatives who have place in Ukraine. But if I have friends abroad, I can send the family there. But I think the first week, there was all the point was for all the Ukrainian reporters really to take care about the families and to move them somewhere to the safe place. It costs money. It takes time. Sometimes you need to do it on your own. You are not really able just let them go. So these are the realities we do have. I'm also I'm in more different position. I'm very like I can afford to devote more time to the work, but I'm also responsible for the team of my organization. So I need to really care understand that, like they have their salaries, they have, not everybody is supposed to film on the front line, and we were supposed to do maybe a bit different things. So I need to take care that, like they have some money, where are their families if they need something. I used to run the TV station. I'm not the boss any longer in there, but because of that, I know a lot of people. I know a lot of journalists who are not from Kiev, who had some issues, who probably would need some help. So in this regard, we kind of feel responsible for a bigger group of people, which is, I mean, it's not a part of the job. It's just part of something you kind of do. Sometimes so many people ask you to help something, which is difficult as you just physically. It's not like you're really not willing to do that, but you feel kind of, you can't respond to everybody. You may be sometimes angry when people, like ask something as if you own them, or react in some weird way, demanding from you something, like not even like not bothering to understand what are you doing, and like that you are probably in the busier position than they are, somewhere far away in front of their laptops. Ukrainian media are not under the government control. We can do wherever we want. We can publish wherever we want. However, it's true that we do not know the number of the Ukrainian uh, military killed. We do not really have we don't really even demand that. um, uh, there is some limit of the, let's say, wartime military censorship. So people they're cautious about using the geographical location, but with the reason, because, for instance, we know for sure that the military objects are targeted, and the video shared online is used. We have numerous cases where, for instance, that person from the territorial defense was given interview near that object, and that object has been shelled. So, I don't think it's really the military, there is it's an freedom of speech. It's quite a legit thing that having access, and we do have access. So, for instance, if we have access to the military or to military object, and like, you are not stupid to tell where is that, like to show the footage. So this is there. I do admit that maybe some people have some kind of level of self-censorship in a way to describe something, but I don't know. But however, I should say the Ukrainian authorities have never been that easily approachable and accessible as we now. We used to have, it was not very easy to communicate with the government prior to war. Like we have a huge fights between the journalism and the president and the politicians. There was a lot of like offense between each other. They didn't give access. They think that the journalists are very critical. Now, like there is no real competition. People are kind of in like kind of numbers of chats with the members of the government. You don't care whether your outlet supported the government or it was like hated the government or was super biased. There are people who really were very biased against the government, who are super critical, but it's all okay. And if you really want, you would have the access to the governor, to the president, to the, something which was not there. So I think that there is a level of some control over the information. In Ukraine, it's quite impossible to hide by the nature of Ukrainians, by the nature of Ukrainian, the state or the way the Ukrainians are. They're quite chaotic. They are a bit careless in a lot of in a lot of cases. So even if there are strict prohibition, you still get to the people. They still tell you more than they needed to say. So even if you meet militaries, they tell you way more they were supposed to tell. And then you say, like, why you told me that? You're not expected to show me this. Why are you showing me this? So in this regard, I don't think that there is a level of secrecy, but there is a understanding that the people are not really capable to digest that amount of data of what's happening, of how to cover all those things. I do think that there would be, within the time, there would be some, kind of, it's harder to be critical in these conditions. It's harder to criticize the government. But also, to be honest, because we have this access, informal access, and I'm not really the closest person to the government. I'm speaking about hundreds of the journalists. You just actually know that they don't hide it for something, for enrich themselves. And even if somebody fucks it up, it's probably because he or she is exhausted or overdone or has no capacity to do that, or maybe just done stupid things. We actually do feel that they are also working beyond their capacities. And there could be good people, there could be bad people in the government, but still it doesn't feel like that they're hiding something from us, or if they are really misusing the situation. To be honest, some of the journalists, indeed, they left the profession, especially males. They went to the front line. It's also happening all over the place. Maybe some of the media has become, let's say, more kind of patriotic. And to be honest, I do not really watch that much of the Ukrainian television at the moment. I don't need that. I have some limited resources I trust, and that's enough for me. So I can assume that it's happening. But I don't think that anybody is lying from the reporters, that anybody has, saying something deliberately, to lie to the audience. I know in the situation that somehow people told something they were not supposed to tell to me, or if they are telling something I'm not very much sure, and I trust, I don't 100% trust them, whether that would be amount or the place, like what happened to that place or this place. So I would rather prefer, like, just not to quote that person if I have any kind of doubts, instead of, referring to that person. However, probably I won't, like, investigate that, because it really doesn't matter that much. Like, sometimes people don't want to tell the amount of the casualties in the town, and somehow I figure it out. Like, I mean, they tell it's less, I know it's more. I mean, should I tell this mayor is lying? I just probably wouldn't tell the figure he said. So, like, these things happening. But uh, I do think that people are a bit paranoid about explaining, especially about the geographical locations. But it's true that the situation is like that. When something is hit, the Russian troops trying to kind of destroy it further. So, for instance, there are cases when something isn't fully destroyed and they would prefer to say it's destroyed, and like, you really not to saying like, oh, no, this electro station, it's still, there is something, like, there on the corner there is something which is still working. I mean, I don't think that there is a sense of that, to do that. I don't think it's something we're doing kind of bad and against ethics. But I'm not writing that. I'm not like, I'm kind of writing in a way that if I know I'm not 100% sure it's true, I just would probably omit that. So that's how it's influencing. But we can express all our, feelings and everything, uh, quite freely. I think at this moment it doesn't matter much, to be honest. It was, when the kinetic, like, real life war is taking place, like, we cared about the cyber attacks on power station, but if it's just destroyed with a bomb, who cares? I think the Ukrainian society is really quite easily can understand what is, the disinformation from the Russian side. It just became so obvious, and they became so blunt in what they're doing, that, like, there is a zero trust to those resources. Uh, I even think that for a while the problem was that the Western media wouldn't really understand that easily. But I think that they're getting better. I think that they also stop to kind of thinking that that's the Ukrainians saying, these are the Russians saying. They actually know that they, like if the Russians saying there is no war in Ukraine, and you need to be stupid not to, so it's not really any longer that information. Sometimes some rumors appears, but it's quite easy to debunk them. Very simple. I just need to, especially myself, I can be in the places where still the others haven't been, and I can tell their stories of the people, or even if it's not really this closed place where nobody been, but not everything is described. Not every, people don't understand what's going on in Kharkiv, what's going on in Odessa, what is the mood there. So like my task is really to convey this feeling, this sentiment, what is happening, and the understanding of the situation. And because the situation is developing, there is always something to tell. I do objective reporting. I claim I do objective reporting. If I come and I see the kindergarten is destroyed by the cassette bomb, and the bomb is there and the people died, and I can film that, and there is nothing to tell, there is no opinion whether it's good or not. You just do not shell kindergarten with this type of weapon, and you know for sure it's civilian object. It's objective reporting. So the problem is, like, if somebody is committing a crime and naming this person and providing the evidence, it's objective reporting. I don't see that I'm not doing it. So I claim it's possible. What should explain that? Should it be biased? To what bias? I don't have real bias. I mean, I think that there are things which are wrong and right, and it's as simple as that. You don't bomb civilians, you don't kill civilians. There is no real reason for that war from the Ukrainian side, and I think it was like demonstrated for so long, kind of prior to the war, that there was no pretext for this war. That's one thing. What could be unacceptable? Yeah, I think we sometimes don't know everything. We might not know something. The problem is when the journalist might know something and tell something else in order to convey something the journalist feels or not. I find unprofessional and unacceptable. So I do think the professional journalism is objective journalism. It's possible to do in any circumstances, and it doesn't matter. Like we Ukrainian journalists work to the very same standard as the international reporters. I mean, like the crime isn't lesser or bigger because I'm writing it as the member or as the resident of the country which is under attack. Like I have same skills, I have the same principle, I have the same eyes and ears to hear it as any other foreign reporters coming to report on Ukraine. And maybe I even understand it a bit better because I understand the language, because I understand the context. So I probably my reporting could be even more objective because I don't have neither cliche, no bias. I just I know who he is. I know this official is good, this official is not. This is really delivering, this is not delivering. Somebody is overdoing, this is not overdoing. So in this regard, I do think that I, even as a local reporter, can produce way more objective information than people who do not know the terrain that well as we do.